Kobe, Shaq, MJ, Pippen, Phil Jackson, Duncan, Parker, Pop, and then the Jeter Yankees. And so you have big cities, New York, LA, Chicago. You have smaller cities, KC, San Antonio. You've got 2 NFL, 1 baseball, 4 NBA. All of them have 1 superstar minimum. All of them have a great manager or coach. The strangest of the dynasties is Kobe, Shaq, where they didn't actually get along. Phil Jackson kind of held it together. It ended very abruptly. It didn't last very long, and it wasn't built on culture. The other 6 of the 7 were kind of culture, bond, same direction, didn't always have everything lined up in terms of personnel. The Lakers really were just 2 superstars and a coach who didn't necessarily get along with the guy in the front office, Jerry West. It was all sorts of egos. It ended abruptly. Phil Jackson held it all together with super glue and his Zen master abilities. But other than that, the 6 of the 7 all kind of feel the same. They last a while. We get tired of them. There's a certain fatigue after a while. They're not all fascinating. The Spurs were kind of boring. But most of them are kind of equipped with a great player, a great manager of men, a strong, defiant culture. The Lakers are the outlier there.
But wait, you said a lot of people got sick of these teams. I don't remember, the Yankees, they're back again. Like, that team was beloved nationally, no? Derek Jeter was like a wholesome leader of the franchise.
George Steinbrenner was loved nationally.
Well, wait a minute. George Steinbrenner was not on the field. Like,
they were
buying players.
People get all upset in New York about what the Dodgers are doing financially. That's what the Yankees did. They were called the evil empire.
I think that's more a Steinbrenner thing. I don't think they were, like, hated. Like, I mean, again, I'm a Yankee fan.
I think people liked Jeter.
So did people love the San Antonio Spurs?
No, they were bored out of their minds.
Okay, understandable. Lakers, I don't think they were hated because Kobe and Shaq were utterly dominant in their prime.
Well, they were kind of cocky.
Yeah. So are any of these dynasties likable, do you think? Or are all of them unlikable?
I like dynasties.
I do, too.
I like them. I think they feel special, but most of these are resented by people, and now the Kansas City Chiefs are.
Okay, let's talk about this. Colin likes dynasties because it gives him something to talk about, and it makes, what to talk about very easily focused, and it's easy just to kind of focus on the same teams. It's easy to keep talking about the same 3, 4, 5 teams again and again and again. And I actually just made a video talking about this before, where it's just like, if all 32 teams were actually really legit and worth talking about, it would be brutal. I'm very confident that people in the media skip Jacksonville Jaguars games. I'm very confident in that a lot of people did not watch a lot of New England Patriots games or New York Giants games. I just don't believe they did. I really, really firmly believe that they skipped those games, and that if all those teams were really just as popular and people loved it, like, it would be like too hard, because it's like, how do you talk about it? How do you remember, every single player, all the injuries, who was missing who and what? Like, it just becomes kind of crazy. I try to watch all the games and I take all my notes and I do all the things that I can, but I also recognize that I can't remember every single thing about every single team. That's why I always talk about that this channel is like, it's very, kind of complimentary in the sense of, like, I'll even ask other people. I'm like, I forget who was injured in that game for the Patriots versus the Lions. Lions fans, you obviously know, let me know. And it's like, they'll say, we were missing so-and-so. And it's like, okay, right, I remember that now. Thank you. Like, it's very, collaborative is the word that I'm looking for, because it's just impossible to kind of keep track of all of that. And having a dynasty is the other extreme of that, where it's just kind of like, we get to really zoom in. We know exactly who Travis Kelce is. We know exactly who Patrick Mahomes is. We know exactly who Andy Reid is. We know exactly who Spags is. Like, we know exactly who these people are. And so it makes content around them very simple. I can create content around the Eagles, the Chiefs, the Bills, the Ravens, the Lions, the Commanders, teams that I know. Even though I do go through all these games, I go through all the games and take all the notes. I'm not going to pretend like I know the Jacksonville Jaguars as well as I know the Kansas City Chiefs, the Eagles, or the Bills, or the Ravens. Like I'm not going to pretend that. You have a lot of people on TV try to pretend like that because they have a whole team of people giving them notes and giving them, film study and all of that, and they do that. I don't do that. I don't have that, and I wouldn't even want that. It would be nice to have, but I would never really feel comfortable sharing opinions that are not based off of my own actual observations. And so, again, like I keep saying, like a dynasty is just the more magnified version of that. So that's just kind of like my own quick thoughts on that aspect of it. But in terms of these teams being resented or hated, and that's why I always kind of take issue when Nick is like, all these teams, Kansas City, they're hated more than anyone. It's unprecedented. And it's like, no, it's not. People hated the Yankees. They hated the Patriots. They hated the Lakers. They hated the Spurs, the Bulls, the Warriors. I think MJ was able to carry the Bulls to a little bit more like global, fandom, as well as the Lakers a little bit to the degree because it's LA, it's magical, everything's all sparkly. At the time, the Lakers were definitely basketball royalty, which I think over the years, that whole idea of royalty has kind of died down a little bit. Same thing with the Yankees. Yankees used to be baseball royalty, and I think that has died down a little bit just because of we're no longer dependent on like newspapers and stuff. So it's just like people don't care. That's why people leave the Yankees and go to I'm going to go to the Phillies. I'm going to go to the Mets. I'm going to go somewhere else. Once upon a time, that would have been like unthinkable. Same thing for the Lakers. Like it's just like the Lakers are not this huge draw. If you have a big free agent, there's not any type of guarantee that the Lakers are going to get them. Like it's very possible like that the Milwaukee Bucks will get them or something. And so I just think that the landscape of all of this stuff has changed now. I think the Warriors are a little bit harder for me to gauge because I literally lived in California during their dynasty run. So like, I'm like, well, everyone loved them, right? Like it was a very positive, and like, it did seem that someone like Steph Curry was a lot more palatable for average people. He's a harder player for people to hate because of his personality. I think it would be easier to hate a LeBron James, easier to hate even like a Michael Jordan to a degree, like kind of similar to what J-Mac was arguing a little bit about Jeter, I guess, so to speak. But I firmly believe that people were not just, loving the New York Yankees. That is not my viewpoint. And again, that is from him living in New York and being a New York Yankee fan. And you're like, well, of course everyone loves them. And it's like, no, I'm pretty 100% confident it's not, because people do see it as, oh, the Yankees are buying championships. They're buying rings and all of that. And again, the Patriots, they had all their issues. People are saying, oh, the Patriots were cheating and all of this. And now, like, they say that the Kansas City Chiefs, that they're getting favorable calls. That's why anytime a Kansas City Chiefs fan kind of cries about it, I'm kind of like, dude, this is the way sports works. Like, stop acting like this is unique to the Kansas City Chiefs. And that's why Nick always fans those Flames, where he's like, this is unprecedented. No other franchise in the history of the universe has ever been like this. And it's like, yes, it has. Yes, it has. Consistently, people hated the Warriors for getting Kevin Durant and said it's cheap and it's cheating, that Kevin Durant's titles don't even count for him. So again, the people in Golden, in California, specifically Northern California, were all like, hey, this is great, everyone loves us. But everyone else was really not like that. And again, people hated, they said it's not fair that Kevin Durant went to the Warriors. That it's not fair. Then if you remember the one series against the Rockets, the Rockets, they petitioned the game and said that the refs were bad and that the refs gave too many favorable calls for the Warriors. So we see this type of stuff again and again and again. And that is what the Kansas City Chiefs are facing as well. And it makes sense. So, it all makes sense to me. Quite honestly. And again, this question, how does KC stack up with other dynasties? Like, I'm more, a dynasty is one of those made up things, quite frankly. It's a made up word that people use and people think that they're going to remember forever. And the truth is, I am so confident that people can't name more than 4 New York Yankees players that were on that run. And they don't even know when it took place and how many rings they all won. Okay, even people who love baseball can't even do it. The Chicago Bulls, I think they're a little bit more firmly rooted in the zeitgeist of stuff because we know it's like MJ, Pippen, and that's just like basketball really hangs on to that, you know, and they really kind of drill it. But I don't know, man, give it another 10, 15 years and you'll probably start to forget that too. Even the Lakers, it's Kobe, Shaq, but like, you know, people kind of lose a frame of reference of like, well, who did they beat to win? You know, how many rings did they win? And it's just like you kind of start to lose sight of it. Same thing with the Spurs and even the Warriors. Again, people remember Kevin Durant and Steph, and of course Clay and Draymond, but what about any of the other pieces? I think people kind of start to lose it. Patriots are led by obviously Tom Brady and Bill Belichick, so like that is going to be firmly rooted. And same thing with the Kansas City Chiefs, Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. So I think football always has the potential to kind of land heavier in terms of like memories of a dynasty, but I just think like a dynasty is just another word for us to say that like this team was special. This team was so great over an extended period of time. But I think the media tries to sell this whole idea that like this is a forever thing, that this is so, we've never seen this before, we'll never see this again, you know, etc., etc., etc. And I do not buy into that. I fundamentally do not buy into that. People always say, oh, we'll never see a player as good as LeBron James ever again. And I'm like, yeah, we will. Patrick Mahomes is the greatest quarterback and no one will ever be better than him. I'm like, I'm very confident that in 10, 15, 20 years, however many years, there'll be a quarterback better than Patrick Mahomes. You know, there'll be coaches that are better than Andy Reid and Bill Belichick. Like, I just firmly believe that. If the Chiefs three-peat, then I promise you in the next 20, 30, 40 years, another team will four-peat. Like, these things just happen. They just do when there's a given enough timeline. Like I always cringe when I ever hear them on TV, whether through a broadcast or, you know, during a game or like in media when they're like, we'll never see this again. And I'm like, guys, have we not learned from the last 30, 40 years? We can see them say those same things in the 70s, in the 80s, in the 90s, in the zeros, in the 10s. We'll never see this again. This is the greatest team. And then it's like, oh, never mind. 10 years later, well, no, this is the greatest team. We'll never see anyone as good as Tom Brady. You know, Tom Brady won 7 rings. There's a real chance that Patrick Mahomes will win 7 or 8 rings. And people are saying no one will ever win as many as 7 rings. Well, if the Chiefs win here, they now have, you know, Patrick Mahomes now has 4, right? So you just don't know. And again, if he wins 7 or 8, then there's a great chance that one day someone will win 8 or 9 or 10. Like it just will happen one day. Again, I'm not saying it's going to happen next year or the next 5 years, but it's just my viewpoint is that these things change and evolve, and players are continuing to get better and better and better. And there probably will be a time when just the stars align. And it's kind of perfect. It's what happened for Tom Brady and the Patriots. They were able to absolutely take advantage of just a awful, awful, awful division. The Bills, a disaster. The Dolphins, a disaster. The Jets, a disaster. The Patriots, royalty. Same exact thing that's happened with the Kansas City Chiefs, right? The Broncos, a disaster. The Chargers, a disaster. The Raiders, a disaster. The Raiders can't even figure out where they want to be, you know, in the country, right? And the Chiefs, royalty. And it's going to happen. It's going to happen probably one day, even on a larger scale, where you're going to have the NFC as a disaster, and one team is just going to be able to feast. Not unlike what happened with LeBron James and you know, the Eastern Conference and whatnot. Like it's going to happen one day in football where it's just going to be like, man, for whatever reason, these last few NFL drafts, quarterbacks have not been that good, a bunch of busts, et cetera, et cetera. A few really great coaches have retired. So now it's really just kind of like 1 or 2 great coaches, and they'll be able to feast. They'll be able to feast. And I'm confident they'll rip off 3, 4, you know, rings, whatever it may be. I really do firmly believe that. Again, I'm not saying it's going to happen within the next 5 years, but I just think if you're a fan and you're watching this stuff long enough, all the times that you think something will never happen again ends up happening again. That's why, to me, getting lost in what's considered a dynasty or not, or how does this dynasty stack up, it's unhelpful. And that's why I don't really even care that much about the 3P. And again, Kansas City Chiefs fans get mad at me when I say that, but I keep trying to emphasize, like, it's a positive for the Kansas City Chiefs, because their greatness, to me, does not hang on them getting a 3P. I already solidify them as great. And if they lose, but then win next year, or if they just lose the next 3 years, but then win another 3 Super Bowls over Patrick Mahomes' career, I'm like, the Kansas City Chiefs were dominant for 20 years. I don't need to narrow it down to a 3-peat window. That's just the way I see it. And again, it actually helps the Kansas City Chiefs. But for whatever reason, Kansas City Chiefs fans keep hearing it in the negative light because they just have their preconceived notions about how I, perceive the Kansas City Chiefs. But again, it's 100% positive in their direction. Not to mention trying to get lost in the conversation what's a dynasty, and it's like, again, I was in California with the Golden State Warriors. I was there before Kevin Durant and post Kevin Durant. So like I was in the heart of that whole run, and yet it doesn't matter. Like it really, really doesn't matter. No one's ever really reflecting on that. I even watched like every single Golden State Warriors game when they won the most games ever. And then when they ended up losing to LeBron James. And it was one of those things where I'm just like, it ends up not meaning anything. So trying to constantly try to rank where a dynasty is to someone else, to me, it actually takes away from what you're watching in real time. Fortunately, when I was watching the Warriors, there wasn't that constant conversation. There was a little bit of that conversation where they said, oh, how would this team fare against the Chicago Bulls? Or how would this fare against the Lakers, Kobe and Shaq? And like, I was watching a little bit of that content, but it kind of just went in one ear and out the other. Because I was kind of like, I don't really care. I'm having fun watching this team today. People are going to say, who would win, the 07 Patriots or the 2022, Chiefs? And it's kind of like, I don't care, man. I really don't. I'm appreciating the greatness that I have before me. So it's like, I don't need to try to figure out where does this rank relative to like the Spurs dynasty, the Yankees dynasty, the Patriots, the Lakers, the Bulls. Like, it's kind of like doesn't matter. And like I said, because you could even see how it says KCP. And it's just like, again, no matter how great, like if the Kansas City Chiefs win this year versus losing this year, they are still just as great to me regardless. Because of how dominant, how awesome, and how consistent they've been. I'm different in the way. I think you're a dynasty. Like the Buffalo Bills, right? They lost all their Super Bowls in a row. I think that was a dynasty, which is definitely one of my more unpopular opinions. Because it was them clearly being an awesome, amazing, dominant, consistent team for year after year after year. I think the Philadelphia Eagles with Andy Reid, when they went to 4 straight NFC championship games, were a dynasty. They were continued excellence. They won the NFC East 4 years in a row, 4 NFC championship games. Like, I'm like, yeah, that was a dynastic run. I'm definitely a little bit more liberal because, again, for me, dynasty means like you were special. You were great. You were doing things that no one else in the league were doing at that time. And so I think that's real. The Philadelphia Eagles during that window with Andy Reid was second only to the New England Patriots. So it's like, okay, that means that team was pretty darn special. So yeah, I don't know. That's just my long-winded, Super Bowl limbo, Kansas City Chiefs take, and dynasty take for that matter. So, but yeah, like I said, it's one of those tricky things where a word like dynasties in sports, I'm a firm believer that it's just kind of all made up. It is. It really is just kind of made up because it's like even this, it says, pro sports dynasties according to Colin, because it's just so inherently opinion based. So it's just kind of like, yeah, whatever you want to believe. People probably think that maybe the Miami Heat with LeBron James was a dynasty, and maybe they're right. 4 straight NBA finals and they won 2. Like, okay, who's to say that wasn't a dynasty? That was a special team. Dwayne Wade, LeBron James, Chris Bosh. That was dynasty. Why not? I don't know. Depends on what you view it. The Golden State Warriors didn't 3-peat. They won 2. They won 1, then lost, then won 2, then lost. Like, is that makes them even more? But then they lost. Then they didn't get to the finals for a couple years, and then they won again, I think, in 22. So, right, that's also like, how long are you saying that the Warriors dynasty lasted? Are you going from 2015 to 2022? Or are you just counting the year before, the 2 years before Kevin Durant and then after Kevin Durant? Like, it's just, it becomes messy. So that's why it's like trying to compare, trying to figure out what's a dynasty, what's not a dynasty. I'm just kind of like, you know what? they're a great team regardless. Even if I even said this before, if the Kansas City Chiefs, before the season even started, I said the Kansas City Chiefs to me are a dynasty. So it didn't even depend on them even making another Super Bowl for me to consider the Kansas City Chiefs a dynasty. Because there was other people that were saying, oh, the Kansas City Chiefs are a dynasty if they win the Super Bowl, if they make it to the Super Bowl. And I was like, they're already a dynasty to me. Because if you remember going into the season, there was real questions about like, is the Kansas City Chiefs a dynasty? And people were like, no, it's not a dynasty. Yes, it is a dynasty. And it's just like, I don't know, like, what are we debating here? It's really just your personal opinion. It's literally just like, do you find this guy or girl attractive? Yes or no? It's like, yes, okay. Now we're going to try to debate whether or not that person is actually attractive. You either think they're attractive or they're not. It's completely personal preference. But those are just my thoughts. I'd absolutely love to hear yours. What do you guys think about the Kansas City Chiefs being a dynasty and how they rank? You know, how they stack up with other dynasties. Let me know in the comments below. I read every single comment, so whether you agree with me or disagree with me, either way. Let's get in some discussions. Let's get in some fights. But ultimately, let's just have some fun. And please do consider subscribing. We're building an amazing community here, and I'd absolutely love to see you part of it. I want to build something that we all genuinely feel connected to. Something that we're really excited to be part of. I think we're well on our way to doing it. Please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, as it really does help with the visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much. See you next time.